All right, we're back.
I am the old American.
Thanks for staying with us. Call numbers 1-347-326-9626. We're going to talk about, got some guests coming on that are very aware of the national scene and see it over and over again of these circumstances by which we've seen in Michigan, in the Eastern District, where there were raids happening at dispensaries. Rick was reporting on this and wrote a really nice blog in the Compassion Chronicles. Rick, lay the foundation for this. What's been happening and where?
Well, first of all, you go back to July 30th. There was a raid in Ypsilanti, which was a DEA executing a state warrant. August 1st, 2 days later, you had the same scenario in another city, Walled Lake. Monday, which is this week, just several days ago, the same DEA scenario raided a place in Ann Arbor called People's Choice. In the interim, those three raids DEA led based on state warrants. In Wayne County and adjacent communities, several raids have taken place by the Detroit Police Department. They include one raid in the city of Warren and two raids on places on 8 Mile and one raid on 7 Mile that we can confirm, and others have been rumored. And these have a completely different character to them. These raids seem like Detroit police, only without additional agency assistance. There's no cataloging of evidence. There's no interrogation of witnesses. There's no blocking of the streets and calling in the extra units. A couple guys come in, they do the raid, they grab the money, they grab the cannabis, and then take off, according to all reports that we have. At this point, Michigan State Police can't confirm their involvement in any of those raids. The Detroit Police Department grudgingly refuses to give any information to media in regards to ongoing investigations. So anything we get from them would just be rumor or supposition because it's not official. At this point, it's difficult to determine what the scenario is in Detroit. But the very concerning issue is the federal agencies being utilized to execute state warrants while, in some cases, local officials or local police agents just stand by and watch them do their job for them. There's been some hypothesis that this is a strategy to make defenses more difficult, so that when those people who have been charged are brought up for their case, defense attorneys are not able to ask all the questions of a federal agent that they would be able to ask of a state agent. But there may be some protections and there may be some things that they just do not have to submit to as far as requests for evidence and interrogation. So other than that, these are just a disturbing trend here in the state to have so many of them happen in so short of a time.
Well, it's very interesting. A lot of issues that have been raised because one of the things that we're hoping to talk about is the raid preparedness in these places, because everyone seems to be, if you're going to be operating any of these locations, there's always a chance that you could get robbed by a criminal or you could get robbed by government.
Jamie and I helped Steph Sherer in 2011 when she came to Michigan, and we did raid preparedness after the Oakland County and other counties raided many medical marijuana facilities then. It was excellent at that time, and I can't imagine a situation where that education is needed more than right now.
You know, it always amazes me that there's not a better protocol that's been applied in this. I mean, what is the necessity of a raid?
Well,
like the idea is like they got to catch them off guard in the behavior that they're doing publicly. You know, in plain view, they're conducting business, but the need to raid, which is like, you know, secretly.
They're policing for profit. Well, they're trying to catch them with cash.
But the point of making it, like,
Supreme Court in McQueen gave them an alternative a way to handle this. The Supreme Court in McQueen said do this administratively with a cease and desist letter, and they instead choose to conduct it like a criminal investigation.
They're still fighting the drug war.
They certainly
my point is
dependent upon that.
My point is what would be right, and the point is when you hear a prosecutor mention McQueen as, you know, notice, like the ruling in McQueen is notice of what the law is. Don't let them get away with it, because really McQueen was the case itself, the explanation of what the proper notice should be, right? the police department and the prosecutor's office had grievances with the business that was taking place there. They outlined them in a complaint. They went to the courthouse and they filed it. They got a civil case number. Got assigned to a judge. They were given a subpoena and a copy of the complaint with the case number with stickers, and they had it served on the facility, giving them notice in a civil document of what those grievances are, and gave them an opportunity to come to court and defend themselves where a hearing was commenced. That is what notice is. And my point is, I guess, that why have we come to accept this idea that the raid, and the raid is the concept of a raid in military gear and all the necessity and urgency to get in there is just comical, and we've accepted it.
Hey.
This military operation on one of these places is not, it's not acceptable because they are not, whatever they're doing is there. It's out in the open. The excitedness, the urgency, the exigency of the need to get in there and use military tactics to do whatever they're going to do is really the, definition of overkill. Because it's like, do you need to do, it would be like going into a Gap, right? I mean, all the clothes are going to remain on the shelves. They're going to remain on the hangers and whatnot. Do they have to, if they went in, just walked in and, or gave notice, look, if you don't take that stuff off the shelves, we're going to come back and we're going to take all of it.
Well, look at the other resource use. Jamie Lowell, I'll ask you this question too. The resource use in the Walled Lake raid, Walled Lake police refused to participate in that. So several other police agencies assisted the DEA there, which meant that several other communities in the surrounding area went with lessened police protection at that particular time because they participated in the raid. Right?
That's right.
Well,
thanks.
The other side of it is that there's this other side which is just not talked about enough. And when people first hear about it, they say things like, are you kidding me? That's the law in the state of Michigan?
Right.
And it is what we're talking about, the forfeiture laws. And in order for any kind of medical marijuana act to be implemented properly, sweeping reform needs to be taking place simultaneous with the forfeiture laws, because the incentive for the current law enforcement community to find an individual, patient, or caregiver outside of the immunity protections of Section 4 allows them to then find that they are not immune from arrest and they can take whatever they want. And once the threshold has been breached, once the membrane has been penetrated, it is a free-for-all of whatever they can get their paws on. And see it over and over again. I can't tell you of the last 4 or 5 calls that we've gotten in my office in the explanation of items that were taken. It's, there's things that have been owned for a long period of time that clearly involved in the jobs that the individuals have or have had.
They don't fit the description of items gained through the potential sale or distribution of narcotics.
But it's anything that looks new that they're taking that they may want.
Or anything that looks old. Ed Boykey's antique rifles were taken from him. And correct me if I'm wrong again, Jamie Lowell, but the Ed Boykey's rifles are still not returned to him.
It's true. They're in the possession of the DEA.
Yeah. Right.
Isn't it just whatever they can sell they take?
It does goes to a value, and that's how they value it, and that's how they talk about it. When you're discussing with them getting the items back, they call it if your client wants to buy it back, counsel, no problem. I'll talk to my boss. We'll come up with a number for you.
If you were just looked at the system, and if you hadn't lived in this country for a long time, and if you just came here from a foreign nation, and people told you that these were the rules and the law, that they could take stuff from you before even proving that you're guilty of anything, and then you had to buy it back from them before they even proved that you were guilty of anything, you would be totally disenchanted with this. This is not the democracy I thought we signed up for.
There is work on this in the legislature with Irwin and I believe McMillan.
Excellent.
So I think that contacting one's representative and saying that you support action in this area to require conviction prior to asset seizure, I think that that could go some way towards supporting their efforts.
And that's a bill that's actually introduced, Chad, isn't that correct? That's already out there?
I'm not sure that it's introduced.
I'm seeing some head shakes. No, not quite yet, but it's been proposed and is significantly close.
Yes. Well, it's been written, I believe.
And I think that the first bill that would be put out in this direction would be about accountability and the requirement to report on all the activity that takes place during these things. I think that's the first stage of the direction they're going in with these things.
Sure, and that's something that is logical. It's a great initial step, and that stops an awful lot of inappropriate behavior because now they know that there's a consequence.
But, making it simple for the representative or senator that you're talking to and just saying to require a conviction prior to seizing anything, I think is the most simple way that one can put it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think that they can relate to that on a much deeper level than just a drug war issue. It strikes constitutional chords. It really does. It goes back to 1776 when you start imagining that this can be allowed in our systems.
Many of them don't realize that.
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
have to be convicted before you have to take.
Educating them for the first time, because oftentimes many of them have just never had to experience the criminal justice system, thank goodness.
They had no idea the drug war had dragged policing in this direction.
Mm-hmm. The burn jag grants, once you get into the legislature, you understand that, but most people don't appreciate that they get rewarded for the amount of drugs they seize, and therefore they predate upon our community as a policing for profit issue, as you mentioned, Chad.
Yeah, but the problem is that does that mean that if someone takes a plea bargain that whatever they've taken, whether it was connected to the crime or not, is then therefore justifiably forfeited? I mean, I just think that the concept here of the way the statutes are written, like you could have a car that you've owned for 10 years and you get caught with marijuana as a caregiver, and just because the car is being transported, the car is being used as transportation to move from position A to position B. One of the stops happens to be at your patient's, that all of a sudden subjects the vehicle to being just taken, paid for, and sold on, their auction because it was being used in the, what they're calling you had, 16 ounces instead of 15 ounces going to your 5 patients or whatnot. That's where it's at.
The car you drove to work in is a vehicle in which aided you in that endeavor. Therefore, they take the ridiculousness of this overreach is once again it's a pendulum that's swinging back into the direction of properness. But it's only through the actions of agents like us on this radio program and the people listening to us that change will ever be forced. So we have to remain ever vigilant, and we cannot let it continue without being challenged. And when we talk about things like Rep. McMillan and Rep. Irwin's efforts, Representative Carlton's bill, Representative Irwin's decriminalization bill, these are great efforts. The human solution, which Steve Green represents with the court support, those are essential services that we do for our community as well. Until we can get greater support from the people outside of our community, we do have to support those of us inside it. So those are things that everybody should pay attention to, and being able to communicate with our POWs like Jeremy Duval, like the Forsbergs and Ryan Basore, like all of our people incarcerated, federally and state.
So, a lot of other stuff going on.
Still waiting for Steve and Steph?
Yeah, but an interesting discussion with another lawyer, which I thought was something that's relevant, and amongst the other things that needs to be changed, or at least argued about, is this, when talking about or discussing the reasonable amount necessary to keep an uninterrupted supply to prong 2 of Section 8.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a situation where a defendant, a caregiver, or patient needs to be able to justify why they had what they had. And we're assuming that prong 1 and prong 3 have been met. And it's an interesting dilemma because interesting challenge, because the word reasonable is a word that in law school is associated directly with the jury, this phantom jury. When you're talking in principles, well, what's the answer to that? Well, the question's what would a reasonable person say under those circumstances? Who's a reasonable person? Like, my favorite T-shirt someone would be walking around with, it would be like, I am the reasonable person. It's just like figmented legal, whoever that may be, and the question would be, if you put two of those people together, would they agree or could they disagree in terms of what creates a question of fact and not? But the language of that prong is a reasonable amount necessary, which, as I said, by legal definition lends itself for a question for the jury. But there's got to be a way in which the reasonable amount prong could be met and satisfactory to the evidentiary hearing, where the judge would rule that you've met all three prongs and no material questions of fact exist for the jury to resolve, and therefore I'm going to dismiss the case. It must be a situation that exists. So as the evidence would be presented in this regard, however it comes forth in terms of the patient's use or what the intended purpose was of the quantity that was being possessed, the state of its drying or curing, the fact that there may not be any other place to take it. I mean, I thought of this today, a situation where, from after the harvest is, what does one do with their excess? I mean, still, you got to put it away. But if someone's caught with it, that they have, and they've just been curing it and keeping it, I mean, is that reasonable? Is that an amount? Because you don't know that your next harvest is going to work, and you know that your next harvest after that's going to work. I'm not advising anyone to do this, but I'm just saying in terms of what's reasonable, but for purposes of amounts and quantities, and when someone goes forward and says, I need 1.5 pounds because it's what I need, and these are the reasons why, and I ingest this amount, and
this method of ingestion takes a lot.
I'm an outdoor grower and need an entire year's supply.
When I start them, I could have some males and some females, so there may be a time when my plant count exceeds what I'm supposed to be at.
Right.
There are many circumstances.
So all of this is an interesting debate, because you got to remember, during this hearing, the court is not supposed to evaluate and judge the credibility of the witnesses. That's to say that if someone gets on the witness stand and patients and they testify that I need 1.5 pounds a month, the judge can't say, I don't believe you, because that is a judgment of their credibility. The issue that the judge should be asking is, as a matter of law, has a prima facie or some evidence beyond mere assertion been established that it's a reasonable amount? And if so, what, if any, material questions of fact exist that need to be resolved by the jury? So if somebody testifies to whatever it may be, one might argue, what would be the reason why that amount said, whatever it may be, by that testifying witness, the patient or the caregiver, wasn't the reasonable amount? Meaning, if that's the only testimony that's offered, how can anybody say that it's not reasonable? You understand, Rick, Jamie? How can you say that whatever the person says is unreasonable, unless, for example, prosecutor calls a witness that says that is absolutely...
Because arbitrary values are something that they assign to things all the time. How many times should someone have to P-test each week? They just decide. How many times is,
True. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is that, the evaluation of this Section 8 hearing should not be based upon anything other than what's presented during that hearing.
Right.
So if the question is what's reasonable, and one person says this is what's reasonable, and nobody else testifies, how could you say that is not reasonable, that any question of fact exists about it?
Unless testimony is not challenged, right?
And challenged within that hearing, and from which the court shall evaluate the prongs and whether a prima facie case has been established. The point being that you have to be wary of judges drawing conclusions based on things from outside of the hearing, things that are not based on anything to do with medical marijuana, that are based on principles and theories and concepts that existed beforehand that may be true or may not be true, most likely not true, that they are bringing to the table. How can a judge say, unless they have some personal knowledge, that a pound and a half isn't reasonable? I'm just saying. Do you get my point?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, to draw from an evidentiary standpoint.
You're no longer trying to prove the criminality, because criminality is not based on need. Now you're trying to prove that treatment methods are required for a certain amount in a certain time. And that's something that goes beyond the court's ability to decide. Your expert witness for the defense shows up, you just have to take his word for it.
Well, there may be a battle of the experts. You may call someone and say, the doctor may even say that's a reasonable amount, but they may have no basis for it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. You may be able to rely on other types of other recognized, amounts that have been codified in terms of quantity. For example, what's that called? The federal government distributes 8 ounces of marijuana to its federally registered patients by delivering 300 plus marijuana cigarettes to be smoked to a physician that the patients can go and pick up. I think California's medical program allows for 8 ounces as well. And the story goes on and on as to reasonable amounts as how they're being measured. So, but my point would be that
8 ounces is a more reasonable amount, actually. Considering
all the different treatment methods that are available, like making concentrates, regardless of the legality of it, or juicing, certainly. It's much more intricate than it is just rolling it and smoking it.
It would keep a lot more patients from getting arrested.
Yes. Yep. And importantly, too, it doesn't represent any kind of a danger to society. In fact, if what you're saying is we don't want transfers to occur, let's find a way to make transfers occur less frequently by giving them a greater amount to transfer in each individual occurrence. If you want people to have a reduced amount of activity, then you have to give them a greater supply. And that makes sense. Now, if the potential to expand past 5 caregivers exists, if the right mindset would exist within the legislature itself, the potential for 4271 opens up a need for a reevaluation of the caregiving system, in my estimation, because you're looking at the production of intentional overages, as I've referred to it in my writings before, and that's saying I have 5 patients, I have 60 plants for those 5. And I know for a fact that I'm going to overproduce so that I can go to the dispensary. And 4271 empowers that. And it does so while recognizing that doesn't represent a danger to anybody, that plan works and is successful. And perhaps we can utilize the success of that to expand on the caregiver system if 4271 actually gets the serious consideration we've postulated that it will this evening.
Well, I guess what I've been talking about in terms of this Section 8 and a reasonable amount is only for those individuals who find themselves outside of the limited exemptions that would protect you from arrest or prosecution. But it's an interesting point that comes up, and I'd like to point out some of these tools that I think that exist for our Section 8 hearings that have been given to us by the courts, and some of the most significant factors that are going to play into the court's decision. But if I was to make any other real comments about my experiences in terms of litigating this, it's that a lot of times you got to back it up, realize that the court may not actually be as learned as in understanding of the law. The rap amongst the judiciary was that it's a confusing law, and you tell a moderately intelligent lawyer who's now wearing a robe, who's reading less and playing golf more, that there's a confusing law. They may not jump right into it. Not every judge is like that. They may not fully comprehend it. I've had many judges say, I don't like this law, it's confusing, blah, blah, blah. But so the point that I'm making is there's a learning curve that you really almost have to exercise at great expense. And can't tell you how many times I've been doing my thing and arguing my point and citing the law and just ready to pounce on anything that anyone else says in contradiction to my theories, and judges nodding their head, what would seem to be is agreeing with me, but really just nodding to not look like they're lost, and then turning to the prosecutor and saying,
"You're being very courteous."
And what do you have to say about it, Mr. Prosecutor, Mrs. Prosecutor? And they'll say blah blah blah. He's like, I'm going with them.
Shocked and horrified
Nice.
at the ultimate opinion.
All right, we're waiting on our guest to call. It's rocking. I think our conversation is just. We're actually starting our warm down now. So we're going to take a break and come back for the final 30-minute warm down, encouraging callers, and we've got some other special things we're going to talk about. But in the meantime, you're listening to Planet Green Trees. 32 minutes left. Call number is 1-347-326-9626, and we'll be right back.
I knew a girl. Her name was True. She was a horrible liar. She couldn't spend one day alone, but she couldn't be satisfied. When you have everything, you have everything to lose. She made herself a bed of nails, and she's planning on putting it to use. But she had diamonds on inside. She had diamonds on inside. She had diamonds on inside. Diamonds. Candle throws its light into the dark, and a nasty word so shines a good deed. Make sure the fortune that you see is the fortune that you need. Tell me why the first act is the last to give every time. What you say and do not mean. Follow it close behind. She had diamonds on inside. She had diamonds on inside. She wore diamonds on inside. Like a soldier standing under fire. Any change comes a day relief. Let the giver's name remain unspoken. She is just a generous thief. She had diamonds on inside. She had diamonds on the inside. She wore diamonds on the inside. She wore diamonds. Oh, diamonds.
With us, Planet Green Trees, episode 162, Assault on Michigan Dispensaries. And I believe we have one of our special guests calling in. We've got Mark Passerini. Is that you?
It is. How you doing, Michael?
Thanks for calling out. For those that don't know, Mark, of course, is the co-founder of Home of Medicine and president of the Ann Arbor Medical Cannabis Guild. Was a MVP at the Hash Bash this past year, and was recently visiting brother and POW victim Ryan Basore in federal prison. Mark, first of all, how are you, and what's Ann Arbor like now in light of this past week?
Well, the roller coaster continues, as I'm sure has been discussed on the show. There were raids over the past few days, actually 2 days ago. So everybody is, obviously concerned about everything. Nothing's really come out. We don't know what the charges are. Nobody's been arrested. But like I said, the roller coaster continues. I mean, everybody's afraid. Patients are constantly calling. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality we live in.
I know, and the other thing which is really the most disturbing, I think the one that just jumps out at everybody so shockingly, is the one in Ann Arbor. We've come to seemingly accept because of just the, advanced thinking. I always joke when you watch any of these documentaries about, the controlled substance laws and the just insane way in which they developed and were implemented since the 70s, there's always that one little blip in the stories that always had Ann Arbor, civil infraction. It just stood out, in all of these, whatever, it's just part of the history that had this significant progressive position that stands above everything. And then, of course, they've taken the lead for the same in medical marijuana and a very, unified, regulated community that is interacting well in a non-disturbing or nuisance way with the local government. And I think it stands out of them because, it's seen as such a protected area. It bothers people, I think, more than others. But, we were going to call the show the raid on the castle. The federal assault on the castle, meaning like Ann Arbor is not a place that would be attacked. But Any thoughts on that? Do you feel that a little bit? Is that some, or am I just way off on that?
No, I think you're right. I think over the past 3.5 years, there have been dispensaries up and running in the city of Ann Arbor with absolutely no problems. As a matter of fact, we have, I would say, a huge majority in terms of support when it comes to the citizens, as well as the city legislators. I think most of city council. Our mayor has been on record as saying that he just thinks it should be legalized in general, not just for medicinal. So clearly, that's his take on it. But yeah, it's a surprise. It's unfortunate, but like I said, it's the reality we've been dealing with across the country.
Blurred lines.
Yep.
But anyways, so in just to continue into this albatross of chaos, let's bring up our next topic that I wanted to talk to you about. Our brother Ryan Basore is currently in federal prison. I know you made the trek out to see him. Tell us how he's doing and anything else you can report on.
Sure. No, I think it was horrible, walking into a federal prison. I mean, I've never done it before, and it's definitely, it shakes you up, from the inside out. And I will say I was really happy to hear and see that it is a very minimum security prison. I mean, it's literally the type of situation where if an inmate wanted to walk off, he could. So there are no fences around the prison. The room that we met in was basically 2 doors from outside, and neither were locked or really guarded. So just that surprised me. Just the level of security was just so minimal. But I was really pleased to see that Ryan's doing great. Ryan is he's been a trooper through all of this. I know you and Jamie and Rick all know how unbelievable his just whole mental state has been up until the day he surrendered himself, and he's still in that zone. I mean, he's lost 38 pounds because the food is so bad, and he went in purposefully as overweight as he possibly could be because he knew he wouldn't be getting good food.
That's true. He did.
But it was the heaviest he's ever been. But he lost 38 pounds in 2 months, and from what it sounds like, it's don't get me wrong, it's still prison, but from what it sounds like, he says it's kind of like a camp. He's going to be away for just a little over 2 years, I guess, and he only has to work a couple hours a day. Got a lot of free time. A lot of free time, obviously, in the joint. But you also have he has a few friends. It's always good to have friends in there. So obviously Lance is in there with him, as well as a childhood friend that he grew up with, and he made a few friends in there as well. So Jeremy's in there, I think, right?
Yeah.
So Jeremy, Lance, and this other guy. So he's doing well. He has things to look forward to, which is great. Every week I think it's on Tuesdays, he goes into a sweat lodge. Every Wednesday Wednesday and Saturday are movie nights. He walks the campus every day. He works out. He's got a great attitude. And overall, I think I would say he's doing great.
It's good to hear, and I know everyone's prayers are with him, and I know he had just an unbelievable attitude going in, and I think that's what it is. It's about, your will and your mentality, in terms of being able to deal with all that. As a lawyer, unfortunately, I've spent much time in jail talking to clients who've been locked up or sentenced, when I'm talking to them for appeals or what have you, and it is really it's hard to explain unless you're inside of it, and it's just a different way, and I haven't watched, I know there's some show on Netflix about the new Orange or whatever, and I just saw an interview with the writer of it, but the concept is that, a lot of more people than know people that are in prison or jail or have had experiences in prison or jail, and it's not so far-reaching to many anymore, and this is kind of like some insight into it in terms of the reality. It arises out of a drug, war on drug issue. but I know nothing else about it other than that. But it was just interesting that it had become so popular, and that it's more of a, and you're describing the same thing. This is not the way you ever envisioned humans to be kept, until you see it.
What's so, I'm sorry to cut you off here, but I had to jump in. It's some of the craziest things that he told me about the place were, he would, and this is his estimation, but 60-70% of the people in there had absolutely no business being in prison. They're either there for drug war type crimes or white collar crimes. He said that the prison is supposed to hold 900. It's at 1,200. So it's overpacked with people that shouldn't be there. These prison guards are making like $24 an hour to really not do much, and you can tell how this whole thing perpetuates itself. It's just it's a sick system. It's a really, and I haven't seen that show either, but I've heard that Orange is the New Black kind of nails it. So I'd be interested to check that out. That's on Netflix, right?
Right. And I just saw the writer of it or what have you, but get interviewed somewhere, read something about it. But what I wanted to ask you is,
Weed, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. I can't speak. I don't know, but maybe.
I think you did. Yeah, Genji Cohen. Anyway, doesn't matter. Go on.
All right. So what I was going to say was in light of the Holder announcement last week, is there any discussion that Ryan was caught up in the mandatory minimum with the other Lansing 6, and because of that, they were subject to prison time. I mean, they got the benefit of the safety valve because they did not fight some of the issues, and certain benefits you get, and you can argue for certain downward departures and whatnot in the different aspects of the guidelines. But at the end of the day, it was a certain amount of months that he's got to do. But that was all premised on the theory that they were starting at a place of a mandatory minimum and working back from there. If you took away the total plant count that they had them all tied into and whatnot, it would be a different story. The guidelines are advisory. Is there any talk about any of those things for a retroactive effect for him? Is that a discussion?
Well, it absolutely should be. As a matter of fact, I spoke with a reporter today who is going to be contacting friend of the show, Sharmi Golson, that did a pretty extensive interview with Ryan a few weeks before he surrendered. He sat down for a few hours, and she literally wrote the whole story down from front to end. And I spoke with a reporter from the Chicago Reader, which is the biggest circulation in the city of free paper. It's a free paper, and it gets a lot of national press, and hopefully we're going to try to get that story out as widely as possible. And I saw Ryan after the Holder or before the Holder announcement, so I didn't get a chance to talk about that with him. But I can only assume that his attorney's going to go visit him and try to get going on this. I hope so. I would think that he should be eligible.
Well, it's interesting because there's no legal maneuver that a lawyer could do. He could file a motion to have something done. All of this is it's the government's, the executive branch's charging authority and, using more discretion in how they're going to do it or changing the policy and how they're going to do it. Not necessarily, it's unfortunate. Maybe if there's some reform on the actual guidelines themselves, which may happen, but still just terrible. And, if when people start hearing these things, and then they're shocked. It's between the forfeiture and the fact that people can't have a medical marijuana defense in federal court. These things that when they're said, people are just baffled by it when it's told.
Couldn't have one in state court for a long time.
So, what else can you tell us in terms of moving forward? Any thoughts, suggestions, or
Illinois?
Oh yeah, that's right. So you were in Chicago, and that was on the way back. Illinois, of course, is the 20th state to announce and legalize medical cannabis. You were at some kind of event. Tell us about that. What was it? Who was involved in it, and how'd it go?
Well, actually, The event isn't until Saturday, but from what I understand, the event is a sold-out event. I think it's about 200 participants, and it's basically people that want to get into the industry in Illinois, whether it's on the growing side or the dispensary side. I'm not sure what the breakdown is of the 200 people, but it happens this Saturday, so I couldn't really give much of a report on it, considering it's in the future.
But you sense the buzz, is what you're saying.
There's definitely a buzz, and I've been in Michigan for the past week, and so I don't know what's going on in the state of Illinois, but I just got here today, and apparently there have been just article after article after article in the Chicago Tribune. It's been pretty much a staple on almost every news station, as well as radio stations, morning talk shows, from the left wing to the right wing talk shows. It's a buzz. It definitely is a buzz. And it's exciting. I think in terms of just getting closer to that 25 state mark. And I think we've only got a couple more years before half of the states. Right now, I think I don't remember. I think 40% of U.S. citizens live under some sort of medical or marijuana reform state.
It's 53% of Americans live under states that are either medical marijuana or decriminalization.
Or decriminalized. That's it. 53 and then 40 are medical, right?
Exactly correct, Mark.
Okay. So, we're almost there. We're pretty much there. I don't know why the DEA still keeps coming in and why Ryan's still in jail, but, Yeah,
that's a good point. I talked with Ann Arbor legend Dennis Hayes today, as we were just throwing around our senseless speculation and hypotheses. But in a way, it almost seemed like it was a reaction to the announcements by Holder, or a reinforcement, one might say, of the announcements of Holder, suggesting that maybe we looked at this in the wrong way. Maybe, in fact, what Holder was saying is that, we still say it's all legal. You want my response to Washington State and Colorado? It's illegal as it's ever been, and we aren't going to stop. We're senselessly going to continue to waste resources, but we may not charge you with the plant count and the weight if we feel like and that's our out. So we'll spend a little bit less, maybe in some of these instances, fewer people, or we're going to come up with, some kind of overarching probation program now. All the prison population of the non-violent offenders are going to be pushed out into some kind of supervised waste of money, where they're just paying other watchers of senseless behavior and activities, and but it's all going to be from the same group of people. It'll just be paid to other persons in a more, arguably, less confined way. But
right.
Anyway, so it's still an interesting time right now. We're going to have to wait it out. I do hope that there's some kind of amnesty concept that is able to be used in some of these cases that are just so absurd and seemingly just missing the boat. It just doesn't make any sense, that it ends up the way that it does. I don't care how there's lacking in logic, and you look at the core of where and why and how it is, and how someone like that gets locked up for, being in compliance with state law. It is just insane. It really, it just distorts logic. It's terrible for all the people that got dragged into that crap.
No doubt about it.
Anyways, we will see a better day. I'm certain of it. I know that in the end, Mark, as I've heard you screaming on the steps of the Diag, science and medicine and the truth will prevail. And the cat's long out of the bag, and there's just a few naysayers left, and the momentum is building.
We're definitely winning.
All right,
we're going down, but overall we're winning. So, well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Looking forward to hearing more good stuff from Ann Arbor. We want to have you back, and you'll have to keep us updated on events as they're going on. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, with 8 minutes left, we are going to return to our weekly report from Steve Green of the Human
Steve Green
Solutions.
of the Human Solution.
Steve, welcome back, and hope you're doing well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Human Solutions can be found on Facebook.
Yeah, we have the Facebook page, and we also encourage you to check the website out. There's some tabs across the top. You can click for support, and there's a calendar that lists the events going on. If there's something in your area or neighborhood, we definitely encourage you to get out and check that out. The site is www.ths-mi.org. As far as court this week goes, we had today Lori Schneider in Kent County. She had a conference today that they postponed because they couldn't get the lab reports and they couldn't get the information to the attorney. So it seems they were just a little underprepared. So they postponed that. Also in Detroit, we had Klein versus Detroit, and
Who?
that was John
okay.
Klein.
That's my client. I'm just joking because
Michael didn't show up for the court.
I knew that. I mean, it's just funny. I just like why, who, what, you know. Of course,
And
we
as far
knew.
as I understand, that was postponed indefinitely due to medical conditions.
I mean, not infinity indefinitely, but we got a date. I think in September. We'll when we confirm that, we'll make that available. But we do appreciate any support. And I think at the end of the day, the court that we're in will appreciate it. You know, to see that because the judge that we have is a unique judge and has been very open about his thoughts about the ridiculous nature of the current marijuana law. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But everyone's got to be in their best behavior. So
I understand he appreciates support, but you know, our motto is to sit quietly like it was ourself in court. So I can't anticipate that he's going to be anything but impressed. And we also tomorrow, again in the most unfriendly area, Oakland County, we have Barb Argro, who's going to be coming up, and that's going to be at 1:30. It was changed in the last week here from 8:30 in the morning to a 1:30, and that's at 1200 North Telegraph in Pontiac, Michigan. From what I understand, we have quite a group coming out for that as well, and you know, she definitely pulls at our heart, and we could do anything to support her. So I expect a pretty big turnout at that court date as well. And it seems that, you know, we're definitely making a move, and we're gaining a lot of recognition and support and confidence with a lot of the people in the community. So it's nice to see that we can bridge some gaps and really get some grassroots going, because, again, it's all about the patients.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Put aside the organization and put aside the dilemma that you find yourself in. You've gone to other jurisdictions. You've gone to other courts. You've seen a variety of different judges, lawyers interact regarding the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. Do you think, first of all, let me just ask it in like a yes or no, but do you think that the judges understand the law, generally speaking?
No.
Okay. Do you think a majority of the lawyers that you have observed, I don't know if they're, independent of whatever your situation is, but the other lawyers that are dealing with the accused that you're there supporting, or independent of that, forget that you're supporting them, when the lawyer gets up and speaks on behalf of the defendants, does it seem as if they're understanding the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act?
It's a very mixed bag. There are some of them, like yourself and some others that I feel confident in their understanding of it, and there are a large, if not maybe larger groups that may have not even read the act before, that tend to fumble a little bit and maybe not object to some of the questioning that an attorney that's went over the act multiple times would object to.
And it's really frustrating, and I sometimes I can't tell you how many times I've been in conflict in a discussion or with a prosecutor or a judge, and their interpretation is so often so off any kind of interpretation, and it's frustrating because you're right, but how do you tell somebody that they're wrong and get them to understand it in a way that they're actually going to change their mind? It's a very difficult. That's one of the things that I was kind of talking about a little earlier. Just even though you're right with the law, a lot of times it doesn't matter unless you can articulate it in a way that the judge understands. Even articulating it the right way doesn't mean the judge is going to understand it, because each of these situations is different, each venue is different, each level of understanding. A lot of the judges, I think, are I'm not making excuses for them because it is not an excuse, but the law has been alleged to have been confusing. They're afraid of it. They don't want to. They want to. It's badly written. They say. But it's just an unwillingness to really give it the worth that it is, which is to act as a shield and not a sword, and that sometimes is lost in translation.
Yeah, that's the best interpretation of the act, definitely. But I think a lot of times, many of these judges have been doing what they've been doing for a long time, and I think, just as a prison guard or, even a doctor, an attorney, you sometimes see so many people and maybe get a generalized formulation of what you think they're doing, or even, have a self-conceived notion of what you think they ought to be doing. And I think sometimes that, it's a newer act and a newer law, and I think sometimes they don't have an open mind to want to take a new look at it. They're kind of stuck in the past a little bit.
Do you think? Well, let me ask you this: is it true that there's a certain suspicion of the judges as to the validity of the card? Like, have you been in courts where the judges, give no value to the card, either for not, just other courts that you've been to outside of Oakland County, because it's not even a place, but where they're doubting the validity of the card, they're doubting the validity of the certification, not allowing the patients to use on their medicine on bond. Do you see that as a theme from the judges?
Yeah, pretty much. I know in some northern areas, Shiawassee County, and some mid-Michigan areas, there's kind of been an opinion that the doctor must just be a pot doctor, and he's just doing this. They don't come right out and say it, but you can tell by the questions and the perceptions that that they are shooting or aiming for. They're just doing it for money, and you probably don't even have a real condition. They would just say anything to get $100. A doctor or a lawyer is gonna risk a license over $100 is kind of ridiculous. But I think that's again the old mentality shining through that nobody really should qualify unless they're half dead and they're only going to use it for a few weeks.
Have you had an opportunity to see any doctors testify at any Section 8 hearings?
Yes, in fact, in the last month I've seen 3 doctors testify, and that was one of the areas that they were public defenders, and I think they did the best they could under the circumstances, but I definitely could have appreciated an attorney that was skilled in the act, and I think they would have objected to probably darn near 80% of the questions that were asked. And in one case, one of the doctors, made some hissing noises and some faces. And
who was it? Please tell.
Dr. Shannon Wiggins.
I don't know who that is. Let me ask you this. Okay, so did the doctor seem to be a good witness? Wiggins?
Yes, as far as she could be, it's hard to recall 3 years back
Sure.
for anyone that has a huge amount of clients or patients. I would have, she can't ask the judge a question, but it would have been nice to have said, on April 15th, what case did you rule on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah, but that's not going to work. The judge doesn't have.
No.
All right, listen. So what about the other doctors?
2 of the other doctors, one of them had a stellar testimony, and he was on point with a lot of his facts. He was able to quote what the lethal dose of Vicodin was, and said there was no lethal dose of marijuana. And he was dead on with all of his testimony and facts. He had the records in his hand and so on. But again, they just tried to attack. Well, weren't you working at a clinic that dispensed marijuana at the time?
What's his name? Do you remember?
I do. Do you remember the doctor's name? Yeah. No. I don't recall it. He was out of Westland, Michigan, and he was working with the Healthy Choice Clinic in Lansing. And it was, he was working 1 day a week as a consultant there. And so one of the questions was, out of your regular practice, what percentage of patients do you write medical marijuana? And it was about 10%. And, well, what percentage do you write out of the other clinic? And it was about 90%. But then he went on to expound and say, they're all pre-screened and they're all there for a reason. There's no, no shortcut about it. They've tried other drugs and other methods, and they obviously haven't worked.
What about the third doctor? Do you recall? Can you distinguish the third doctor?
The third doctor was Proctor, Vernon Proctor, and I think he did a remarkable job as well.
It's good to hear. Good to hear. Some of the doctors stepping up. Sounds like you gave them all at least 3 or 4 out of 5 stars. One of them a 5.
Yeah, and I think the common thing was they all stuck to, we recommend ingesting the marijuana and not smoking it. And I know that, I'm just going to keep pounding on that one because with the Carruthers decision, it kind of puts everybody in the catch-22.
Yeah, but I don't, I think that's just, that's like, that almost is like ignorant because the leading, I know they're trying to seemingly meet the, ill-perceived and scientifically disproven concept that smoking is bad for you. And Donald Taskin, the leading researcher in pulmonary cancer research, has been the biggest opponent of smoking marijuana. After 30 years, couldn't prove his theory correct and conceded that it has no negative effect of smoking it. But I understand that because of all that negative information and incorrect information, it would be something that doctors say. But it's interesting that they're hanging on to that, But I guess that's, I don't know. I just, you know what I mean? Like it's not true necessarily as far as we know. And the other argument is if it was true, they could actually link it to marijuana smoking. I promise you that it would be plastered all over everything, anywhere. Anytime someone stood up and said, "Oh no, smoking marijuana causes lung cancer" or something like. It doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying? If they had it, they would use it.
Absolutely, and that was, you mentioned Dr. Taskin, and that was something he set out to prove was that marijuana was going to cause these problems. And what he found in a mixed result, people that didn't smoke anything, people that smoked cigarettes and marijuana, and people that smoked just marijuana, the lowest amount of lung cancer were the ones that actually smoked marijuana, not even the ones that smoked nothing at all. So I think that goes to show that, there's some neuroprotectant and some anti-cancer properties contained in the plant, whether it's smoked or eaten.
Yes. Maybe
natural herbal remedy.
Maybe even suggesting that there was some kind of evolutionary connection all the way back when the amoeba crawled out of the water. All right, we can leave it there, Steve. We're a little bit over, but it was good talking to you, and wish you and your family well, and I know everybody really supports your presence, the organization, and the support that they get. It's always good to look back. Even the lawyers appreciate when they look back and they see that there's support in the courtroom, rooting for everybody.
The Human Solution, I believe, is going to be at this conference coming up, Clarion in Ann Arbor. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Saturday night we'll have a chapter meeting, and I encourage you all to stop in.
Excellent. Excellent, Steve. All right. Thanks for calling and listening. We'll talk to you next week. Hopefully, good luck this week with whatever endeavors you may have, and have a good night.
Thank you, and you too.
All right. Take care. All right. Despite our attempts to finish in the 2-hour range, we seem to have gone over a little bit, but it's okay. We're going to wrap it up right here. Any final thoughts, Chad?
No, thank you.
You're already out the door. I can see that you're no longer connected to the show. You've given in. Jamie's barely holding on.
We'll have to talk to Steph and see if we can rearrange things. She's very busy. I'm sure she got caught up in something, so let's see what we can do about that.
Right. Like belly buttons, everybody's got one of those. Just kidding. Sure. It's probably like freshman baseball coach.
And ani.
And Rick, with that as the any final thoughts?
Good conversation this evening. Support the Duvals. Maintain an awareness about what's going on around you, and if you're in the dispensing business, be more cautious now. There's a very good reason for you to be extra vigilant.
I think it's explain my theory as to why the Fed's made a presence here in light of the Holder announcement. You've got a certain element of the rogue. DEA is not going to give in on this. They got to have their presence shown. This isn't our territory. That's always been our territory. Has now been relinquished. One little stinky, animal that lives in one of the trees now may not throw a coconut at you. But that doesn't mean that this territory right here is not ours anymore.
It's our coconut to throw.
The point is that they came in to lay down their scent again. Like, look at it. Don't think that means that we're not.
Life in the jungle.
They peed on you from the
All
tree.
right. Planet Green is 162 in the bag. We will see you next week. Be safe, everybody.